Here at home, the murder of a jogger in Queens has left a community on edge as the hunt for her killer continues.
Around 10:30 at night, police were combing through dense reeds beside a running path in Brooklyn's Spring Creek Park. Suddenly, a man's scream shattered the silence. Rushing towards the sound, police found a father standing over his daughter's body. 30-year-old Karina Vetrano was lying face down on the ground. Her running clothes had been pulled down. Her face was bruised and her teeth were shattered. Her legs were also covered in scratches. Officers tried to pull her father away, but he refused to let her go. He just kept repeating the same phrase over and over, "I have to take my daughter home." Just hours earlier, Karina had gone out for a normal run. She was a seasoned runner who often jogged that same path with her dad. But a back injury kept him at home that day. Right before she left, she promised him that she would be fine. 2 hours went by, and she didn't return. When investigators surveyed the scene, one thing became terribly clear. Karina had fought for her life until the very end. She had even bitten her assailant hard enough to break her own teeth. Investigators would later find DNA underneath her fingernails. But when they checked it against the national database, there was no match, which could only mean one thing. Somewhere close by, a man had brutally assaulted a woman in broad daylight and had vanished without a trace. But what forensics later uncovered was far more horrifying than the murder itself. DNA analysis held a terrifying secret, and when police finally captured the killer, some officers said the details were so disturbing they honestly got the chills. A few of them even needed counseling after the case concluded. So, to truly understand the full story, we have to start from the very beginning. All right, friends, I'm going to pause here for a moment. I'm very curious to know where my audience is tuning in from. So if you don't mind, tell me your city and the current time where you are. Thanks for taking a second to do that. Drop it for me in the comments. And now, let's continue. Karina Vetrano, a 30-year-old runner, was the kind of person who always challenged herself to go a bit farther, a bit faster. That afternoon seemed no different than any other day. At about 5 in the afternoon, she left her home to go for a jog near Spring Creek, a secluded area within East New York, Brooklyn. Spring Creek is a nature preserve that spans about 2 square miles. It's filled with overgrown areas, tall weeds, and dense brush. The park is just a few blocks from the house Karina shared with her family. She almost always ran there with her father, Phil, a retired firefighter, but on that day, a back injury kept him at home. Phil felt uneasy about her going there by herself. The area was quite isolated, and he told her that he didn't think running there alone was a smart idea. "Don't worry, I'll be fine," she reassured him. Just moments before she left for her run, Karina snapped a quick selfie. In the photo's background, you can actually see her mother, Kathy, walking by. Then, Karina headed out. Phil later recalled that about 45 minutes after she left, he was overcome with a bad feeling, like something was very wrong. By that point, nearly 2 hours had passed. Karina still wasn't home. Phil called her phone repeatedly, but she didn't pick up, so he contacted a childhood friend who worked for the New York City Police Department. A squad car was dispatched to the park to search for her. When officers were unable to locate Karina, the search was expanded immediately. Units from the 106th Precinct came to help, wading through thick reeds that stood as tall as 10 feet. The search continued even after nightfall. As we were moving along the trail and checking the area, there was this intense sense of dread, recalled NYPD Detective Barry Brown. At one stage, someone even said out loud, "This doesn't feel right." Phil was also helping police with the search by using the geolocation data from Karina's phone. Investigators were eventually led to a marshy section about 15 feet from the running path. Locals had voiced concerns about that spot before. The high weeds in that area had long been viewed as a safety hazard by the community. At approximately 10:30 that night, officers heard a man scream and immediately sprinted in that direction. It was Phil. He had found his daughter's body lying face down in the dirt. Officers had to physically pull him away because he refused to let her go. He kept saying over and over that he needed to take her home. Detectives, including Barry Brown and Lieutenant John Russo, saw that Karina had bruises on her face and numerous injuries. Her teeth were broken, and she had abrasions on her legs. Her workout top and shorts had been displaced, and authorities noted there were signs indicative of a sexual attack. Karina had battled her assailant with such ferocity, she bit him hard enough to fracture her own teeth in the process. Detectives also observed that one of her hands was clutching a clump of grass, suggesting she had been dragged along the ground. The chief of detectives would later remark that it was unmistakable she had fought for her life until her very last breath. The medical examiner's office conducted an autopsy, which confirmed her death as a homicide resulting from strangulation. While strangling her, the attacker applied so much force to her neck that police could discern the distinct impression of his hand. Phil later expressed that he felt it was his destiny to be the one who discovered her. She guided me to where she was. Her dad needed to be the person to find her. Of that, I have no doubt. He called it one of the most demanding and complex crime scene investigations in recent memory. The view from Chopper 2 illustrates the sheer scale of the undertaking. We are managing an active crime scene situated in an extremely isolated area, so we're examining the area as thoroughly as possible under difficult circumstances. The grass is quite tall, requiring us to use machetes to uncover more evidence. On Thursday, scores of detectives moved through Howard Beach, questioning landscapers and those working on home improvements. They were simply inquiring about our closing times and whether we were on the job that Tuesday. They are determined to find this person. Whoever did this, I truly hope he's caught. This evening, search parties are still navigating the thick undergrowth, clearing 300 feet at a time by first cutting it back by hand. They are proceeding with caution to avoid compromising any potential clues as they work. We are clearing a massive area behind and adjacent to the crime scene, and we are performing a meticulous search for evidence. Her mother and father are understandably distraught. They are seeking closure and justice, and they wish to bury their daughter with dignity. We all come out here to jog and walk and just take in the tranquility of the place. Now, I'm too scared to come out. In his latest update, the chief of detectives termed this case a severe community threat and outlined the next actions: a 6-month audit of all Parks police activities in the vicinity and gathering data from the police's sex offender tracking unit. They are also pushing forward with their cell phone tower data analysis. But as of now, there's only the growing possibility that the perpetrator was not someone Karina Vetrano knew. Well, that certainly keeps everyone in the neighborhood on high alert. My worry is that if it's someone local, he could strike again. Karina's father remembered Karina Vetrano as a joyful, motivated, and successful young woman. She was the type of daughter any parent would dream of. Despite being only 4'11", she possessed an immensely strong spirit. She was exceptionally bright and had obtained a master's degree from St. John's University. She was living with her parents and working in Manhattan as a speech therapist, aiding children with disabilities. A friend of hers, Erica, said that Karina was like a vibrant spark, a tiny firework of life with an infectious laugh that could resonate through a whole room. Besides her speech therapy career, she also promoted a club in Etoria part-time. At the club, she would invite patrons and collect a commission on the revenue from VIP packages. Friends also pointed detectives to a man named Paul, who worked at the same nightclub as Karina. They mentioned he had made unwanted overtures towards her and would turn hostile when she rebuffed him. At one stage, they even worried he might have been stalking her. Police, however, eventually eliminated him as a suspect when his work alibi confirmed he was on the job when the murder took place. And the deeper detectives delved into the case, the more it appeared to be a random act of violence committed by a stranger. We are still actively processing the crime scene for evidence at this time. Our teams will be on site for several more days. It's a remote location. We've established a crime scene there and intend to cut down nearly every weed in the vicinity until we're certain we have all the evidence. We've secured a great deal of forensic evidence so far, but we haven't been getting many Crime Stopper calls. We've only had 3, and all of them have been very general in nature. Because of this, we've increased the reward to $10,000 for any information. It's a very tight-knit community, I'm heading over there right after this. We've had nothing but support from everyone in the area. We're hoping to get more information. This is an isolated place. The young woman was jogging in broad daylight, so we're hoping someone saw something as she went into the park. As of now, we don't have many solid leads to follow, but the evidence collection is still underway. The evidence that has been gathered up to this point is now with the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner. We aim to upload a DNA profile in the next few days. Believe me, these kinds of cases are common in our city. The victims aren't targeted. These attacks usually happen late in the evening. While stranger assaults are down citywide, we still encounter them on the streets. An incident involving a jogger at a park in broad daylight, however, is exceptionally rare. Roughly 400 mourners attended Karina Vetrano's funeral. In attendance were several firefighters from the New York City Fire Department. She was so full of life, Phil said in his eulogy. She embraced every single day as if it was her last, packing as much as she could into every moment. In just 30 short years, she achieved more than many do in a lifetime, and our bond went beyond father and daughter. We were practically the same person. She was a beautiful young girl. I never knew her. Not at all. But it's just tragic. I'm addressing the coward who murdered my daughter Karina for the first time since this horrific act. The Vetrano family spoke to the media right outside their residence. Make no mistake, my daughter was a true force of nature, and I assure you, you will answer to that force for the rest of your miserable existence and for all eternity as you suffer in hell. My daughter was a firm believer in karma, and as the whole world can now see, she is magical. I promise you, you will pay for this forever. Justice is coming. Understand? That is why the police exist. That is why God exists. There will be justice. Authorities were unable to extract a usable DNA sample from the sexual assault kit. They did, however, successfully build a DNA profile from material found under Karina's fingernails and on her mobile phone, which lay just a short distance from her body. Her death sent shockwaves through the close-knit community, leaving many afraid and desperate for answers. A reward fund also received thousands of donations for information that might identify her killer. The police department contributed $25,000. Another $10,000 was added by the mayor's office, with the remainder raised on GoFundMe. They're pursuing all leads. But what's essential is for someone to come forward and say, "Hey, I know that person." That's the breakthrough we need. If I ever wake up with nothing left to do, I know I'll fall apart. So I must stay active every single day in any way possible. For today, this is my purpose. It's what keeps me going. A tractor with an industrial mower was dispatched to the crime scene today, along with scores of officers from multiple units. The NYPD requested FBI assistance since the land where Karina's body was discovered was federal property. Federal agents bolstered the investigation, offering extra resources and even using drones to survey the location from the air. Police also searched a homeless camp over 1 mile from where the crime occurred, but investigators later ruled out any likely connection to the killing. They also brought in for questioning registered sex offenders from the area, as well as several individuals known to live within the park itself. To dedicate more resources to the case, the NYPD established a specialized task force. It was composed of 2 detectives from each of Queens South's 8 precincts. Simultaneously, officials had to manage safety concerns at the park. A federal official stated the large area where Karina was found was only patrolled around its edge, with checks happening at irregular intervals. The very same officers were charged with patrolling sections of Gateway National Park across both Brooklyn and Queens, a territory that also encompasses Spring Creek. This presents a major challenge for us. We have discussed it with the public before, and frankly, it is well known, stated the U.S. Park Police Commander. Without any eyewitnesses, detectives said that the DNA profile was their single most critical lead. It had been run already, but so far had not generated a hit in the national system. The CODIS database we use for DNA was only established in 1998. So, the perpetrator could have been incarcerated before that time, Chief of Detectives Boyce explained. Or it could be a younger person who has never been to prison at all. In a case like this, reviewing past similar events was critical. During the initial stages of the inquiry, New York detectives mentioned that Massachusetts State Police had contacted them to check for a potential connection between Karina's case and the murder of Vanessa Marotte, a 27-year-old Google account manager found dead in Princeton on August 7th. At the time, Vanessa was living in New York City but had gone to Princeton to see her mother. It happened on August 7th. She left for a jog but never returned. Her remains were later found in the woods, just a short distance from her mother's residence. New York officials stated there was no provable link connecting the two incidents. They stressed, however, that every potential avenue would be explored. According to Chief of Detectives Boyce, the prevailing theory was that Karina's killing was a chance event. Their primary hypothesis remained the same. Investigators theorized the attacker fled into the thick undergrowth near the scene, ultimately heading in the direction of the Belt Parkway. Law enforcement reviewed all potential getaway paths, yet no security footage recorded a distinct picture of an assailant. Each home bordering the park was searched, and occupants were questioned. The search was so challenging that detectives called it finding a needle in a haystack, and in truth, the investigation truly felt that way. As the case gained significant media coverage, an employee from Verizon, who was on duty in Spring Creek Park when Karina died, reached out to law enforcement. He informed investigators about spotting a man whose behavior struck him as odd. This individual wore a woolen hat and was present nearby during the estimated time frame of the assault, according to detectives. Using his account, a composite drawing was produced and made public on August 31st. During a media briefing, Chief Boyce highlighted a specific detail that was unusual. He pointed out the dark wool hat, noting the date was August 2nd. It seemed out of place. He had a wool cap on in that location. The investigation then zeroed in on this bicycle trail, which tragically lacked surveillance, to locate the man described by police as black, 5'10", and between 35 and 45 years of age with an average frame. We need to talk to this individual. That is the sole purpose of this release. Following the distribution of the sketch, Robert Boyce received a call from a retired NYPD supervisor. He was then security chief for a Brooklyn apartment complex and mentioned a tenant bore a strong resemblance to the drawing. Officers arrived at the unit. Initially, the resident, a man named Kevin, would not let them in. The police remained positioned outside the residence until he finally emerged. Kevin conceded he did look somewhat like the drawing and was brought in for an interview. At the station, he declined to give a DNA specimen. According to Detective Barry Brown, that refusal instantly raised red flags for everyone present. Law enforcement ultimately collected his DNA from a water bottle he had used and thrown in the trash. However, when the tests were complete, the findings revealed Kevin's DNA was not a match to the genetic profile from the scene. With that potential suspect cleared, the investigation was essentially reset to its starting point. In an effort to uncover fresh leads, Crime Watch Daily published security footage of Karina taken only hours before she was killed. The footage captured her along what authorities called her regular jogging path. Her relatives and police hoped it could offer a vital hint. Officials confirmed this was the final image ever taken of Karina alive. Those close to Karina also gathered to walk the final paths she was believed to have traveled. Since the DNA profile yielded no hits in the system, Phil pressed detectives to employ a technique known as familial searching. This process involves seeing if a suspect's family members are already in the database. He argued it was a way to find the culprit. It could potentially establish a direct link, which would significantly focus the investigation. Back then, this type of analysis was authorized in 9 states, excluding New York. In response, Phil launched a petition to alter the law. Familial DNA analysis is more advanced, employing unique software to find partial matches instead of perfect ones, which suggests a genetic relationship to someone in the database. This could resolve countless unsolved cases. The ACLU, however, opposed the measure, claiming such a policy might result in what they termed miscarriages of justice. Frankly, I believe they are uninformed. unaware of the reality that we are solely focusing on criminals. 6 months following the discovery of her body, authorities identified a person of interest in the murder of Karina Vetrano. A man was brought in for questioning. The following day, he was formally charged, and he stated, "Please let my mother know I'm sorry. Is it possible to talk to a member of the victim's family? I regret my actions." The chain of events culminating in his arrest had actually started roughly a month prior, following a long period with no significant progress. In January of 2017, the case was re-examined by Lieutenant John Russo. He had been one of the responding officers at the discovery site, and he was also a resident of Howard Beach. While going over the files, Russo recalled an incident from May 2016, mere months prior to Karina's death, and he began to wonder if there was a potential connection to the case. Across the street, by the house next door, I spotted a figure moving away from me. This person was in a long-sleeved tracksuit with the hood up, even though it was about 80 degrees out. I remember thinking to myself, that's odd. Russo mentioned the man appeared to be observing the houses nearby, which prompted him to call authorities. But when officers reached the scene, the person had already vanished. The very next day, similar suspicious activity was reported by neighbors. They described a man in a black and white tracksuit trespassing on several private properties. Russo later encountered the same man and asked who he was. His name was Chanel Lewis. At that point, Russo thought that was the end of it, assuming their paths would not cross again, but the memory resurfaced in January. He had a strong gut feeling about it, a sense that something wasn't right. So he began to look into Chanel Lewis. He found that Lewis had no criminal history, but had received several summonses near the Brooklyn part of Spring Creek Park, just across from the preserve section in Queens. After this discovery, Chief Boyce got a call from Russo. Boyce said there was a tone in Lieutenant Russo's voice that made him think this might be their guy. So we pursued it immediately. When authorities started speaking with Chanel Lewis, he informed them he was very familiar with the area. He described himself as a loner with very few friends who often walked the trails to listen to music and clear his thoughts. He cooperated with detectives and voluntarily submitted a DNA sample. Police also went to his former high school and learned his past was both troubled and complex. News reports indicated that while he was a student, he once expressed to a teacher's aide a desire to stab female classmates. "I want to stab all the girls," reports say he stated. He allegedly said this on May 17, 2011, at the age of 15. Sources also alleged that he once asked, "What would happen if I brought a knife to school?" The school then notified police, and he was taken in as an emotionally disturbed person. He was brought to Kings County Hospital Center for an evaluation and was later discharged. Reports indicate that the following month, school officials contacted authorities again after he supposedly cursed at a female student and threatened her family. He was once more taken to the hospital for evaluation and was subsequently released. A tabloid article also alleged he had been diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, but this was a claim that was apparently never independently verified. While investigating the case, that particular claim only surfaced in a single New York Post article. In September 2011, he was reportedly moved to a private school for students with emotional and behavioral challenges. Former classmates would later describe him as a loner who was frequently bullied at school. They said he was beaten up constantly. One student noted that even girls would taunt him and strike him. He had absolutely no friends. Another former student mentioned that he sometimes attempted to defend himself, but this was a rare occurrence. One classmate on his school bus route said he was often mocked for the way he dressed and for his appearance. At the same time, multiple former students insisted they never saw him as an aggressive or confrontational individual. He would always walk through the school with his hood pulled up over his head, one of them recalled. The executive director for Martin DePore Schools later stated that Chanel Lewis graduated in August 2015, and no threats from him were ever reported while he was there. During his enrollment at the school, he had no disciplinary actions on his record, and there were no other reports of threatening remarks made toward other students, the director said in a statement. Chanel's father defended his son, but in doing so, he gave investigators a critical detail. He told detectives his son couldn't be the killer because, on the day after the murder, he had taken him to the hospital. Chanel was treated for an injury to his hand, which he claimed he got in a fight. By checking local hospitals, detectives found the doctor who treated him. According to Detective Barry Brown, the physician confirmed he had extracted a foreign body from Chanel's hand. The DNA collected from Chanel's voluntary sample was then processed, and it matched the DNA discovered at the scene of Karina's murder. The foreign object extracted from Chanel's hand was now believed to be a piece of Karina's broken tooth, which likely broke off when she bit him. This is Detective Deal. We are at the 107 precinct in the second-floor detective squad area. Today is February 5th, 2017. The time is about 10:33 a.m., and I am beginning the recording at this time. Now that I've informed you of your rights, are you willing to answer some questions? Okay. Yes. All right, fine. Chanel, let's begin with what I believe was a Tuesday evening on August 2nd, 2016. Do you recall that particular day and night? All right. And where were you then? I was over in Spring Creek, near Gateway, right by the Gateway and Spring Creek Mall. Spring Creek Park. The park. Right. You were inside it? Yes. Okay. And were you with anyone? Or were you alone? Alone. All right. Around what time did you arrive at the park? About 5 o'clock. And were you on the path or in the grass? On the path. Okay. Now, while you were at the park, did anything occur? Yes. What took place while you were in the park? This girl was just jogging, and then, things escalated because of another situation. Right. The girl who was jogging, was she alone or with someone else? Alone. And when you first noticed her, where were you located? In the grass or on the path? Okay. Were you in motion or were you standing still? I was moving, listening to some music. Were you walking or jogging? Walking. And you were heading toward her? I was walking in her direction. Then we were side by side, and it all just unfolded. You said that as she came alongside you, while she was running and you were walking. What happened at that point? Because of that other incident, I became enraged and started striking her and everything. Okay. Before you did that, where did you strike her? In the face and in the mouth. Her face and mouth. Before striking her, did you grab hold of her or just hit her immediately? I sort of grabbed her first. You grabbed her, and how did you take hold of her? Which part of her body did you seize? I began hitting her due to what was going on, okay? But did you seize her before you began striking her? Or was hitting her the very first thing you did? What was your first action? I grabbed her. Okay. And in what manner did you grab her? Okay. With both my hands? All right. And which part of her body did you grab? Do you recall? Her shoulders? Her waist? Her neck? Can you remember? Somewhere around here? Okay. Around the shoulder area. Did she say anything? No. Did she cry out? No. Her tooth broke. Excuse me, her tooth broke? Were you covering her mouth at any point? No. All right. For approximately how long would you say you were striking her? The duration? The whole incident lasted maybe about 5 minutes. Okay. How far from the path would you say you pulled her into the grass? How many feet, roughly? Probably around 10. Okay. And what was the condition of her clothes? How were her garments? Like, torn off? Yes. Okay. What was removed? Her clothes. You mentioned you did this because of some anger you were feeling. Is that correct? All right. Can you explain that anger to me? See, I used to reside at a different location than I do now, right? And sometimes this man comes around. He'll play loud music and bring a bunch of friends over there. I did not like it because it made me feel unsafe and uneasy. I like my home to be private and calm, and I usually no, I understand. Chanel, I'm aware that last night you were very reluctant to discuss this, correct? That was last night, but today you felt ready. You were prepared to speak about it, right? I understand you told Detective Brown you wanted to turn your life around, right? Yes. Okay. And Detective Brown advised you to wait until we were in this room to speak on it. That is correct. And that is what you have done, isn't it? Yes. Okay. Chanel Lewis, age 20, was taken into custody and charged with murder in the second degree. What possessed you to do it? Chanel, had you been in hiding for 6 months? Move this way, keep going, right over here. Unifor. Following his arrest, Karina's family appealed to the public for guidance on using the remaining GoFundMe money. You all contributed, so you deserve a say, Phil posted on the page. He later stated that nearly $300,000 was distributed, which involved a donation to Archbishop Malloy High School to found a scholarship in Karina's name. Chanel Lewis was then formally indicted by a grand jury on several counts. He faced a total of 13 charges for murder and sexual assault linked to the death of Karina Vetrano. He was looking at a possible life sentence without parole. Lewis entered a plea of not guilty. Tonight, Lewis's family insists it's impossible. To her family, I'm sorry for your loss, but you have the wrong man. Richard Lewis is the father of the accused. He stated, "He's a wonderful young man. My brother is a slight person. You saw him on television. He's a thin man. He couldn't kill a girl that strong because she was a powerful individual. Alone, he could never kill a person like that. Today, I want to thank everyone who reached out and offered support to my family and me. I love my son. I stand by my son. I raised him to be a God-fearing man who respects life. My son is kind, devout, and would never harm anybody. My son struggles with mental health and needs assistance. He is not a criminal and requires mental health services. Please respect my family's privacy in this matter and allow my son to receive help through the proper channels." Karina's family had long been advocating for investigators to adopt familial DNA searching in criminal inquiries. Then, in June of 2017, the New York State Commission on Forensic Science approved the use of that method for investigations of murder, rape, and other serious felonies. The decision was passed, despite challenges from civil rights groups, who asserted that the method could entangle law-abiding citizens in investigations merely through family ties. Chanel Lewis was already in custody by the time the commission authorized the policy. So while the decision didn't alter Karina's case, it stands to impact future investigations. As noted before, investigators also explored a potential link between Karina's murder and the slaying of Vanessa Marcotte. Authorities later concluded the two cases were unrelated. On April 15, 2017, it was announced that 31-year-old Angelo Colon Ortiz was arrested after DNA tied him to Vanessa's case. He subsequently pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and unarmed robbery. Then, on November 2, 2022, he was given a life sentence. He won't be considered for parole until 2067, when he is 81 years old. November 2018. The courtroom was packed with friends and family from both sides. As stated, it was an incredibly emotional scene. Karina Vetrano's mother was in the courtroom. She clutched a cross and was crying for much of the time. Karina Vetrano's accused murderer, Chanel Lewis, was, of course, also present. His mother was there too, holding a Bible and also frequently in tears. Then, opening statements commenced. Representing Lewis, defense attorneys with the Legal Aid Society told jurors their client is innocent. They have major reservations about the evidence, citing no witnesses and that Lewis was pressured into confessing while people rushed to judgment. In his opening remarks, Assistant District Attorney Brad Leventhal said their paths crossed randomly. She did not provoke him. He saw her, and he killed her. The prosecution stated that Chanel had no girlfriend, few social ties, and was jobless. They painted a picture of him as a person who harbored significant anger. Their theory proposed that this anger was the catalyst for the attack, which they labeled as random. That day, he unleashed his anger on a beautiful young woman, a girl in a top, the prosecutor declared. The defense, however, refuted these claims. There will not be any eyewitnesses. No one will come into this courtroom and say he did it, said defense attorney Jenny Chung. She also claimed the prosecution was attempting to force a square peg into a round hole. Chung also contested the police questioning of her client, a session which lasted for over 10 hours. Procedures were cut short. The prosecution's evidence is incomplete, she stated. The defense also asserted that the DNA evidence tying Chanel Lewis to the scene of the crime was not dependable. Attorney Robert Moeller argued the crime scene had been tainted by several people, which included Karina's father, making it less credible as solid proof. Lewis's defense argued his statement was coerced and should have been thrown out. They claimed he only confessed out of exhaustion from the long wait, desperate to leave. But prosecutors hammered on what he told investigators. He was irate and directed that rage at Karina Vetrano. The prosecutor stated, "Those words came from him. He's the one who strangled Karina Vetrano." Prosecutors also heavily stressed what they called undeniable DNA proof. An expert confirmed on the stand that DNA from under Karina's nails, her neck, and phone was a match to Chanel's profile. A pair of NYPD detectives took the stand to describe the meticulous and thorough evidence collection methods they employed. Several photos presented in court were so graphic they left Karina's parents visibly distressed. At moments, they were unable to contain their sorrow and once had to step out of the courtroom entirely. Final statements in the heart-wrenching trial for the death of 30-year-old Karina Vetrano have concluded. The prosecution depicted the defendant as a bitter, resentful 22-year-old who saw Vetrano jogging in a Howard Beach park and unleashed his rage by killing her. He was filled with rage, venting his frustrations on Karina by seizing her, forcing her down, assaulting her, and then choking the life from her. The defense countered that the police were the ones feeling desperate after a 6-month investigation yielded no leads, that they targeted Lewis, and investigators relentlessly forced the evidence to construct a case that incriminated him. Instead of letting the evidence shape a theory, they manipulated it to fit a narrative. The grueling trial went on for 7 days. Before long, the case was in the hands of the jury, who would determine the outcome. Following a full day of discussion, the jury dedicated over an hour to re-examining the defendant's second taped statement. They also requested a readback of 74 pages from the state's DNA specialist's testimony. In addition, the jury asked for another viewing of Karina's autopsy photos. Following a day and a half of debate, 5 jury members declared they couldn't convict with absolute certainty. This resulted in what's known as a hung jury. The panel informed the judge in writing that their differences were irreconcilable, having tried every avenue to find common ground. Following extensive deliberation, we are still deadlocked. We see no path forward. We feel we have explored every alternative. Due to the impasse, the judge announced a mistrial. Karina Vetrano's parents appeared grave and shocked as they exited the court. Her relatives wept openly as the judge called a mistrial. The decision sent a wave of disbelief across the room. "Mr. Vetrano, a quick word? Your reaction?" Karina Vetrano's family was left in a state of stunned silence, realizing justice was now postponed. They offered no comment on the decision. Lewis's lawyers, however, spoke to the press. "The jury sees that the DNA isn't everything. The confession isn't everything. And you can all now see there are complexities and problems with this case. So, do you consider this a victory? Well, avoiding a conviction is a positive outcome, I suppose. But, having this resolved would also be a relief. This ruling meant the entire case needed a complete do-over, further extending the already lengthy legal battle. For Karina's family and friends, this prolonged their agonizing journey. It forced them to revisit the horrific details of the tragedy and endure a second trial in their quest for justice. For the second trial, prosecutors left nothing to chance, introducing fresh evidence. A central component was Chanel's internet search history before his arrest. His search history included terms like indictments, plea bargains, criminal proceedings, and articles covering Karina's murder. The retrial then commenced in March of 2019. In the retrial for her 2016 strangling, Karina Vetrano's father once again took the stand. At one moment, Vetrano's father fell to his knees before the jury. emotionally recounting the discovery of his daughter's lifeless body on a trail. The defense team again firmly maintained their client's innocence, contending that his previous taped confession was the result of coercion. His lawyers also asserted that had he been the actual murderer, a far greater amount of his DNA would have been present at the scene. However, the prosecution held their ground. They stressed that the defendant's DNA was a match to the evidence and highlighted the taped statements where he confessed to the killing. Model. Just a day before the retrial jury began deliberating, an anonymous letter reached the defense team. It was allegedly from a concerned NYPD officer critical of the investigation. The letter made several claims about the case's early stages. It claimed that in early meetings, NYPD Chief Michael Kemper insisted they seek 2 strong white men from Howard Beach. ABC News' Tsunami host reported that if the letter and its claims were real, it could be grounds for an appeal. One of Lewis's attorneys stated, "We have credible information police hid crucial details about other suspects, which was never shared with the defense." The defense also revealed police sought Lewis's DNA during a massive sweep that, they argued, was racially biased. In that sweep, DNA was taken from over 360 African-American men in Howard Beach, Brooklyn, and Queens. Because of this new information, we will file a motion on Monday for a hearing on the prosecution's failure to disclose exculpatory evidence, plus a hearing on unconstitutional racial profiling in this case, the attorneys said. In response, Sergeant Brendan Ryan said the NYPD's investigation of the murder was thorough, and the Queens District Attorney's case clearly proves Chanel Lewis is responsible for her death. He added that many court hearings and 2 criminal trials, spanning over 2 years, had already scrutinized the issues raised in the letter. He said the letter had many false claims. Assistant DA Leventhal added, "This anonymous letter has no verifiable information. Its author is clearly trying to disrupt the trial." This morning, the judge denied the defense's request for a hearing on this. The case then went to the jury for deliberation. The moment's importance was clear. The first trial ended in a hung jury, unable to reach a verdict, forcing a mistrial. Neither side was treating the outcome with overconfidence or complacency. Much was at stake, not just for the legal teams, but for Karina's family, who had endured years of uncertainty. On April 1st, 2019, the verdict came. Inside the courtroom, everyone held their breath. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Chanel Lewis was convicted. A very different reaction this time from Vrono's parents leaving court. "Sir, tell us what you're thinking right now." "My child. Thank you again. Thank you. Your thoughts?" Jubilation. Justice is served, and thanks to the jurors for seeing the overwhelming evidence. All the anger and years of pain, but mainly the anger, it was lifted. It was gone. Lewis raised his cuffed hands to wave farewell to family and supporters as he was led away. Some supporters who followed the case closely and a family spokesperson say they question the verdict. How can a young man walk into Howard Beach, kill a physically fit young woman, and leave Howard Beach unseen by any camera from the Gateway Mall? Any camera there at all? After the guilty verdict was delivered, the case fell back into uncertainty. Now, for a stunning turn in the Karina Vetrano murder case, sentencing for her convicted killer was delayed over new claims of juror misconduct. For Karina's family, it was another painful blow, a reminder that a guilty verdict doesn't always bring immediate or final closure. One juror allegedly accused 3 others of ignoring the judge's rules on when and how to discuss the case. The judge agreed to delay sentencing for a hearing with the jurors. Queens District Attorney Richard A. Brown later countered the defense's claims, giving a different version of events inside the jury room. In a sworn statement referenced in the motion, Juror A claimed Juror B began stating conclusions about the case from the trial's start and continued throughout. One juror reportedly said to another, "Look, my decision is made, and I trust yours is as well." This occurred on the second day of the trial, following testimony from the victim's parents. District Attorney Brown argued these remarks, attributed to the 4th juror, didn't indicate any pre-existing prejudice. He claimed it was simply an emotional response to the harrowing details about the state of the victim's body. Jurors are instructed to consider only the evidence presented in the courtroom during their deliberations. But a sworn affidavit alleged that some jurors started discussing information that was never entered into evidence. Moreover, some of these details may have been entirely false. One juror suggested the lack of the defendant's DNA in intimate samples could be because the victim's body had absorbed it. She purportedly told a male juror, "I understand this better than you. You're a man. I've been raped." The defense motion contended that with this statement, she improperly introduced her personal experience as supplemental evidence. This could have made other jurors feel unable to challenge her claim, compelling them to treat it as fact. Such a declaration was labeled juror misconduct, as she effectively acted as an unsworn expert witness for the prosecution. Put simply, the jury was considering information from outside the official court record. These arguments were presented by Legal Aid Society attorneys Robert Myler, Julia L. Burke, and Jenny Chung on behalf of Chanel Lewis. However, the juror denied ever telling her peers she was a rape victim. In her own sworn statement, filed with the prosecution's official response, she stated, "I have never been the victim of rape, nor have I ever claimed to be. To my knowledge, no other juror made such a claim during deliberations." The motion also cited another instance. Defense lawyers pointed to a juror who allegedly formed conclusions using information not introduced as evidence during the trial. This juror reportedly compared injuries from a separate, unrelated rape case to those of Karina Vetrano, arguing the sexual assault was confirmed because the wounds in both instances were identical. The defense argued this was inappropriate because the information the juror shared effectively introduced new facts outside of the trial's scope, exceeding a typical juror's general knowledge or life experience. The juror in question admitted to mentioning his prior jury service on another rape case. He stated, however, that another juror quickly told him to stop, and from that point on, he refrained from sharing any more details about his past jury duty. According to an affidavit, the district attorney defended the jury. The argument was that no juror had passed themselves off as a professional expert. Rather, they were each drawing upon their own life experiences and offering opinions as everyday citizens. This, the defense claimed, constituted misconduct. Following the verdict, the jury foreman told CBS 2 it was a slam dunk, pointing to two key pieces of damning evidence. The confession wasn't forced, he said, and the DNA evidence was just so overwhelming. He added that while the jury was united on the murder counts, at least two jurors were hesitant on the sexual abuse charges. Yet, in a separate post-verdict interview, an anonymous juror claimed to have felt pressured by others to vote guilty. Ultimately, the judge dismissed all claims of juror misconduct. With that ruling, the sentencing proceeded on April 23, 2019. With respect to murder in the first degree, the court sentences you to spend the remainder of your natural life in prison with no possibility of parole. For Karina Vetrano's family, it was the moment they had awaited for over 2.5 years. They delivered emotional victim impact statements in court before the sentencing of Chanel Lewis, the man who would now spend the rest of his life in prison for her murder. There are no more Merry Christmases, no more Happy New Years, no more happy birthdays. Life has no more pleasure, no smiles, no happiness. All of that was taken by that convicted, murdering rapist. Only faith in God and my belief in heaven stopped me from taking my own life, for fear I wouldn't be allowed to see my baby again. He described his family as zombies walking the earth, just waiting to be reunited with Karina. Phil Vetrano then told 22-year-old Chanel Lewis that his daughter had a message for him. "She told me if you stand in court today and ask for forgiveness, if you tell her you are sorry, she will forgive you. But know this, those aren't my words, and I will never forgive you." Her mother brought a part of Karina into the courtroom. These belonged to Karina. The very shoes she put on the morning of August 2nd before going to work and wore for the entire day. Though they are small, Your Honor, these are the shoes of a giant, a brave warrior, and a queen. At certain moments, you could see Lewis just over her shoulder. That empty look on your face is just a reflection of your own vacant, detached soul. You experienced a million deaths every second of every day. You kept breathing. You kept eating. You kept searching your phone for pornography and violent rape, but God was watching you the entire time, Chanel Lewis. The judge added 32 years in prison to the life sentence for second-degree murder and sexual assault. This is a tragic outcome where both families have lost. He called it the worst nightmare any parent can face. Your child goes for a run and simply never returns. One day you will find that everyone who followed this case has moved on with their lives, leaving you completely alone. But I can assure you, when that day comes, you will still be behind bars. The defense then spoke for Lewis, after which he said only a few words. I am not guilty. I am sorry for what the family has lost, but I was not responsible for this. Assistant District Attorney John Ryan stated that the defendant in this case failed to show even a hint of remorse for this savage crime. I hope this sentence provides the family with some measure of comfort, knowing the man who murdered their loved one will never be free again. After the sentence was handed down, outside the courthouse, his mother and a group of supporters protested. As the prosecutor headed to his car, the crowd yelled, "You should be ashamed. You are a bigot." A few minutes later, the prosecutor emerged to face the protesters instead of taking another exit. In a further act of protest, they blocked Queens Boulevard for about 2 minutes. No justice. You could see 2 people being arrested there. Some of the organizations they are a part of announced they would take their protests to Howard Beach in the coming days and weeks. Meanwhile, the legal team for Chanel Lewis is already preparing his appeal. Those who maintained his innocence argued that the NYPD was under immense pressure to find a suspect quickly to close the case, causing investigators to focus on him. Due to that pressure, around 40,000 people signed a petition that called for the Conviction Integrity Unit to review the case. Despite the demands for his release and the continuous public debate, the legal decision stood. After 2 trials, 1 mistrial, and years of reviews and arguments, the jury delivered a guilty verdict, and the court imposed its final sentence. In the eyes of the justice system, that verdict was the official end to the legal process. In a case defined by its complexity and controversy, the conviction delivered a legal conclusion, though it failed to bring emotional closure to a story that had consumed a family, a community, and the public's attention for years. Karina Vetrano's family says they want her remembered for more than how she died. Through scholarships, memorials, and community work, they are working to keep her name and legacy alive in the community she cherished. Something so horrible and tragic. We have some good that has come from this. We now have a scholarship. Amidst the legal fights, the appeals, and the public arguments, one person was often overlooked: Karina Vetrano. Her life, not the legal struggle that came after her death, was always the real center of this story. And in the end, it is to her that this story returns. Karina Vetrano was a daughter, a friend, and a young woman building a future, who worked with children and lived a life full of routine, meaning, and dreams. On a perfectly normal summer evening, she walked out of her home to do something she had done 1,000 times before. She went for a run, and she never returned. That simple and devastating truth became the core of this case. How a completely ordinary moment can suddenly become final, and how the loss of just one life can create a silence that a family, a community, and anyone who knew her story can feel for years to come. A memorial as lovely as Karina Vetrano is hidden away in Spring Creek Park, where a stone butterfly, an angel, and a candle rest. But maybe the most important fixture of all is her father, who comes back here each morning to remember his daughter. It's the only place I can go to feel at peace. And it might sound odd because right where I am sitting now is the place I found her. But I believe it is because it's the only place left where I feel any sense of control. If she could be here, or if you could talk to her today, what would you say? I talk to her every day. Every single day I talk to her, and she speaks back to us in countless ways. Karina's father believes her spirit lives on, from the songs of the local birds to the entries on her blog. They also hope to compile her writings into a published book. What legacy do you believe Karina would have wanted? Just like this, exactly as the world sees her. Unique, intelligent, stunning, she was on a path to greatness, and she truly reached it. We can't know what her life would have become, but it's comforting to know we can finally start moving forward.